All right, I think we're live. So welcome everyone to the joint hearing between the House Appropriations Committee and the House Ways and Means Committee. Today we have a briefing on the blueprint for Maryland's future. Not live yet. Oh, hold on, everybody. Sorry.
She said no.
Okay, I'm going to start over. Welcome everyone to the joint briefing between the House Appropriations Committee and the Ways and Means Committee on the blueprint for Maryland's future and implementation. I want to especially welcome our Speaker of the House, Adrienne Jones, who has long made this a priority of the House. And I think her being here really emphasizes that fact and how important this is to the members of the House of Delegates. Thanks for being here, Speaker. Chair Atterbury.
Thank you, Chair Barnes. And welcome everybody. I also want to welcome the speaker. I'm very happy to be here in our first joint hearing together with the new chair of appropriations. This is really for the benefit of our new members on my committee and also on appropriations. In recent years, Maryland has undergone a bold new experiment to remake our educational system as one of the best in the world. And as you heard, it's the speaker's priority. In order to accomplish this goal, the legislature established the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education and passed its recommendations as the blueprint for Maryland's future. The blueprint is a comprehensive rethinking of education of children from pre-kindergarten through entering the workforce. Much of the implementing legislation that would launch the blueprint began in these two committees with the tireless efforts of the Ways and Means Vice Chair Alonzo Washington and the new Chair of Appropriations, Ben Barnes. So we owe them a great deal. And with that, we can go ahead and get started. I'm going to kick it back over to you, Chair Barnes.
Thank you for that introduction, Chair Atterbury. With that, we are pleased to be joined by Chair Leggett. It's great to see you, sir. We also have Executive Director Heiss. I will let you all portion out who wants to start and who wants to go through it, but welcome to you both. Great to see you.
Thank you so very much. Let me say thank you and all to the entire legislative body for your tremendous work over the years. To provide this blueprint as a model for not only for our state, but really for the entire country. I've heard from and talked to many people all over the nation who've expressed admiration for what we are doing. So thank you for your tremendous work. As you've indicated, I'm here with Rachel Heiss, our standing executive director, and I also see one of our partners, Clarence Crawford, who is here as well, with the State Board of Education. Let me take a moment of personal privilege to acknowledge my newly elected delegate from District 14, Delegate Bernice North, and seeing her in this role is really a pleasure. So congratulations to you as well. As you've indicated, this is a bold, unprecedented step by the state of Maryland. I emphasize that because as I talked around the state about the blueprint, one of the things that I find from many people is that they tend to believe that this in some way, form, or fashion is somewhat business as usual. And so when you talk about the blueprint, many believe that we're going to simply dot the I's, cross the T's, and make minor adjustments as we go forward. But when you said, Delegate Barnes, that this is a bold new step, it really is. And we have to keep that in mind because one of the things that we have to ensure that as we go through this transformative change, people understand that this is bold, and the General Assembly realized this when they passed the initial legislation. We're going to go through a couple of slides because there may be some people who are new to this process or newly elected, and we're going to do that just quickly, and then we'll get to the meat of some of the things that you may have questions about. And so, Rachel, why don't we come up with the first slide that basically tells us what this entire blueprint is about. It is about the future marks of unprecedented investments in Maryland public education system that serves nearly 1 million pre to K-12 students. It was established solely to focus on the implementation of the blueprint for Maryland's future. And that vision is really what is important for us today. I'll quickly go through these slides because I think you've seen and heard a great deal about it. But this is not an accidental process. You may know that this slide conveys for you that this process started in 2016. And here we are today. That's a length of time for which you've had an opportunity to study, to analyze, and to review the processes that led us to this particular process. So many people believe that we've just started in the last year or so. You may look at this chart and realize that, of course, this has been a process that started 2016. Now, here's the heart and the meat of what we're trying to achieve, the expected outcomes. The blueprint overarching goal is to improve the quality and equity of Maryland's educational system so that all, underline the word all students, regardless of where they live, household income, race, ethnicity, gender, language spoken at home, disability, and any other unique characteristic can leave high school globally competitive and prepared for success in post-secondary education, work, and life. Let me just stop a moment to look at this. This is a bold statement, and you see the term all. That's our objective. That's what we are looking to try to achieve here. And we have a number of measures that allow us to at least work toward that particular goal. But when you see this, and when we passed this a couple of years ago, you see how bold this is. All Maryland students, regardless of where they live and the other special qualities that I've indicated before. Now, how are we going to do that? Well, we have 5 pillars that have been outlined. And the 5 pillars are not to be looked at as simply an isolated item here or there, but they all work systemically together and in tandem to achieve the overall objective. For example, when you look at early childhood education, that starts the process that we hope will lead to all of the other measures and steps that will follow. But you can't have success with early childhood education without high quality and diverse teachers. We need, at a time when you see the number of teachers going down, when there are challenges, Maryland is stepping forth to say that we need more teachers and we need more diverse teachers. We want to make certain that our kids are ready for college and career readiness. So by the end of the 10th grade, we should have an understanding and a clear mark that our students are college and career ready by the end of the 10th grade. Now, you simply can't do this in the classroom by itself, no matter when you start. You can't do it without teachers, and certainly you can't do it without more resources for students to be successful. Because as we know, around this state, there are a number of students who are not prepared because of things outside of the classroom as well, the impact on families, the impact on the challenges that they face in their communities. Then, of course, one of the things that will guide us and make certain that we're doing this and hold us accountable is that we have an entire pillar dedicated to governance and accountability. How do we measure this? We're not going to wait to 2032 to look to see whether or not you've achieved this. We will have metrics, we'll have analysis, and we'll have changes as we go forward so that on an annual basis, we'll be able to measure this. We'll be able to know whether or not the students are achieving the success that we want. And this will be disaggregated so that we will not have all of this mushed together so that we cannot understand in terms of ethnicity, race, and other factors, what our students are doing on an annual basis. Now, what we've done, and as you know, there's a 7-member board that oversees this. And we're implementing this plan over 10 years. But let me go pretty fast because I think you understand that pretty well to our next slide, because this is what I want to make sure that you fully understand. That as we've developed the procedures that we are looking at to ensure implementation, as we've developed the procedures to make certain that we have the first comprehensive plan, we did not do this in dark. And we did not do this with just a few meetings and the board coming together to make decisions that will impact this entire state. We've made presentations about the blueprint all over the state. We've facilitated and convened opportunities to discuss this broadly. We've had educational forums. We've developed and maintained a website. We've held public meetings. All of this is open. All of this has been clear. And we've made this as a cornerstone for us that we want to be transparent and communicate as much as possible. Now, given all of that, we have just developed and we've just released the initial blueprint comprehensive plan. And I hope that you have a copy of Rachel. Did we get that delivered? for them today to have a hard copy of that?
Yes, every legislator and others should have a hard copy.
Let me at this point acknowledge the work of Rachel and her staff, along with others, along with the state board and many of our partners. We started late with a limited staff, conducted all of those meetings that I've just described, all of the transparency that I've just described, and we have put together a huge comprehensive plan that is really remarkable, given the work that it took to get us to this point. Once you have an opportunity to go through it, to evaluate it, you'll see how comprehensive it is and the work that we've outlined for us to do over the next few years. This plan basically highlights our expected outcomes. It identifies what we need to implement, when these things need to be done, who is to implement it, and other key requirements and guidelines. It is comprehensive. Now, in doing that, the number of meetings that we've had, the number of opportunities to develop this, we held 4 spring implementation planning sessions, 9 interactive summer work sessions, frequent collaboration with the Blueprint coordinators, and all of the people involved in our educational process, from superintendents, boards of education, county officials, higher education institutions, teachers, and principals. We received feedback or made available on our website, and we looked at those as well. We had on November the 10th, a public hearing. We received 444 pieces of written feedback that we analyzed, looked at, and in many cases made adjustments as it related to all of that we received. And ultimately, on the 12th, the board adopted the blueprint on the 1st of December. This is a comprehensive plan. And I want to spend a little bit of time and allow Rachel now to talk just a little bit about the plan itself. But before I do that, one thing that we did not do, and I thought it was important for you to know this, we have not made any major legislative recommendations or changes for you to consider. There may be a couple of technical changes here or there, but we decided not to suggest at this point in time any major legislative changes. Hopefully, we'll be able to come back at a certain period of time and talk about some adjustments. We did make adjustments that we thought were consistent with the original plan itself, made some minor adjustments here and there, but we did not make any significant legislative changes for you to consider at this point in time. But there very well may be a few technical changes we'll have to make as we go through this legislative session. So Rachel, I'm gonna give you a few minutes to go through that comprehensive plan and what we did and the steps that we've taken to get that. And then we'll turn it over to questions, answer the comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Welcome, Ms. Heiss.
Thank you. Happy to be here. So just picking up where the chair left off, the one recommendation that the AIB is making at this time is a technical correction to the new full-day pre-kindergarten funding formula, which in the first few years of its implementation is funding low-income 3- and 4-year-olds whose family income is at or below 300% of the federal poverty level. The blueprint law, as many of you who were here then will recall, did also set a priority for 3- and 4-year-old students who have disabilities, are English learners, or whose families are experiencing homelessness, regardless of the income eligibility. But that was not incorporated into the funding formula. And so at this time, there are some school systems that have enrolled, for example, 4-year-olds who have disabilities that don't meet the income eligibility criteria, and they are not receiving funding for those students. They are receiving special education funding, but they're not receiving the pre-K funding. And so the AIB thought that that was rose to the level that it needed to be corrected immediately and was clearly the legislative intent. And there could be other technical corrections that may be identified as we consider the law further. In terms of the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan, I would just say you can see the intense amount of public working sessions that were held. And I would emphasize they were not just open to the public to view, but many of them, the interactive summer working sessions actually included stakeholders in the public in the meeting, and they were able to make comments, ask questions, and participate in the discussion. So it was very transparent. As I said, we have delivered hard copies of the blueprint to legislators, and we are working to distribute those around the state to school boards, superintendents, blueprint coordinators, other stakeholders, county officials, and so we are doing that as quickly as we can. And we will also have next week a form on the AIB website that will allow people to request printed copies.
Yeah.
So
But you can get online now. The entire plan itself is online.
Yes, you can. I was just about to.
Yeah.
I will go to the screen.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. So. But it is posted on the AIB's website, and you can see the website link there. You can also, anyone, including folks watching this, can use this QR code with your phone camera, and it will take you directly to the initial comprehensive plan, an electronic digital copy. And I'm just going to go back, and Mr. Chair, did you want to talk about the advisory committees before we go to Q&A?
Right. Well, we have now 4 advisory committees, and the good thing about this, we had over 200 applications for this. 24 members were selected. They represent a broad swath of the state, a huge level of people in and around the educational process. The advisory committees have met 15 times, and we think they're a very important component to this. We've met with a number of people, as I stated before, from superintendents, local boards of education, county officials, philanthropic organization, advocacy groups as well. We've held 35 public meetings today. Let me repeat that: 35 public meetings today. And as I've indicated, we have produced now the first comprehensive plan, and we have much more work ahead. But this has been a very, very busy period of time. And we've done this with a limited staff in a relatively short period of time. Mr. Chair, I'm going to stop there and see whether or not there are any questions or comments from your members.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Heiss, and thanks for the work you're doing. I see we've taken this down so we can see any questions. Raise your hand, and either I or Chair Atterbury will call on you. Any questions from Ms. Heiss? Mr. Leggett? Madam Chair, you see any questions?
I don't see any hands. It's a shy group.
Well, let me just say this, Mr. Chair. We've done some good work here with the leadership of Chair Jones, Speaker Jones, but now it's up to you all to implement it, and we appreciate the work that you're doing and the hard work that you've outlined here today. We want to keep working with you. I do believe you mentioned changes statutorily, that there are probably places that we do need to tweak this. With any large omnibus bill, that's going to be the case, and we want to work collaboratively with you, Ms. Heiss, and your staff on that. So hoping we can do that as the session rolls around. And see, I've talked long enough now. We have a question. Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you. It's good to see my former county executive, Ike Leggett, and chair of the Accountability Implementation Board. Thank you to the executive director and all members for the work that you all are doing. Just wanted to come back, Mr. Chair, Chair Leggett, to your comments where you mentioned increasing teacher diversity, which I completely agree with. Just curious as to whether there is any collaboration or cultivation of relationship with Maryland's 4 HBCUs, but also the MSIs that we have here from Montgomery College that is now designated as an MSI, to Goucher College. We have HBCUs and MSIs that can certainly serve as an excellent source for, teachers from, teachers college to the classroom. And so just curious as to whether there's any, building of relationships so that there's a pipeline. And when we talk about teacher diversity, we could be looking to our state's 4 HBCUs and 2 MSIs for, for those, for that diverse workforce.
And thank you, Delegate, for the question and comment. The short answer is yes. We need to develop more connectivity to ensure that we enhance that pipeline. And we've been working with the state board. We had a presentation with the Board of Regents for the University of Maryland system, for which most of those institutions that you've just described are part of. We can't have success, again, without more teachers, quality teachers, and a more diverse level in our system overall. There's no way for us to fully implement this without that. And so there will be a continued robust reach out. And I think there are a number of things that are already in terms of providing grants, fellowships, and other things to enhance that. There are some places around the state that have already done that prior to the blueprint. For example, at Bowie State, they've got a very robust plan there to enhance the number of minority teachers as well, and others around the state as well. This plan, and working with the state board and the local boards, will continue to try to make sure that we enhance that even further. But the short answer is yes. Let me make one other comment before we leave, unless you have other questions.
We do have another question.
Let me emphasize this again.
Mr. Chair, we do have one more question.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Take that before you do any kind of closing, but we'll certainly give you time for that. Delegate Mangione.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation, both of you. And I guess it's kind of open-ended question, excuse me, and kind of broad, but I guess a lot of us are just wondering what would be kind of a timeline, because obviously COVID-19 and all the coronavirus stuff has really done a number on education. What would you say would be a realistic timeline in, unfortunately, some very poor results that we're starting to see come out now, until with all the investment from Kerwin, where we'll see real results that we can say, this was a great idea, this was a great investment, and is it 5 years, is it 10 years, is it 15? So we're not quick to judge if we have doubts.
Okay, one of the things that we will have, I think by the end of the summer, Rachel has a committee in the plan whereby we will have those matrices outlined, the assessments outlined, and all of the things that we need to do in order to proper respond to your question. And the reason why I hesitate to give a precise answer, I want that committee, that task force, to provide the analysis so that we make certain that we have all people in the room to ensure that what we decide is the floor, the background of where we are today, and what we believe is the success everyone is participating in. Let me give you, by way of a football analysis. Today, are we at the 1 yard line or at the 5 yard line? We have to agree where we currently stand today in terms of the foundation for which we start. Now, will we consider success after 1 year we've moved from the 5 yard line to the 6 yard line? Or is it the 10 yard line? How long would it take us to move the ball completely down the field to the other goalposts? This is what this committee will have us analyze and have precise answers for that this spring, no later than this summer. That is crucial. The question that you raised is crucial because based on what we've outlined, we will have a metrics annually over a period of time, but we want to be fair to the boards of education. We want to make sure that we have all of this right so that when we say we are starting at X, we all understand where X is. When we say that we have progress, we know from where we started to where we are the next year. And we will come to an agreement about those fundamental questions. Then I will be able to tell you, say within 1 year, we're here, within 3 years, we're here, 5 years, we're here, and we're all consistent with that. Because if we get that wrong, we may have built the wrong expectations, or we may be unfair to the local boards of education. We want to make sure we get that piece right. And that's why we're taking the time to come up with those metrics over the next couple of months so that everyone is clear about the question that you just raised.
Thank you. I like the sports analogy as a former athlete and really simplifies, and I think that answers it. And we're looking forward to that and wishing you all the best of luck. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bill.
I see Delegate Ebersol has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So relevant to the progress question, I believe that I would certainly be in the court of saying that we have to watch our over-reliance on looking at the single data points of test scores as evaluating how the blueprint is succeeding or not succeeding. Can someone elaborate for us a little bit on some of the other ways, some of the other measurement techniques, and some of the other variables we'll be using to look at how it is succeeding? You know, for example, longitudinal studies. If you have some information there to make sure that we don't just see scores drop a few points and say that it's failing. What else are we using as baselines?
Rachel, why don't you answer that in terms of the committee's work for this spring?
Sure. So the AIB is going to be convening an outcome measures work group, and we're in the process right now of identifying the members of that. It will include local school system representatives, State Department of Education representatives, and others, as well as experts in this field, because it's a very data intense exercise, and also the Longitudinal Data System Center will be participating in this. And essentially, that's exactly what this group is going to be doing. They're going to be reviewing the outcome measures that are included in the initial Blueprint Comprehensive Plan. They might recommend some changes to those that are laid out in the plan right now in terms of what the goals are for the various pieces of the blueprint within each pillar. And then they're going to be specifically identifying the metrics that will be used to assess that outcome measure. And it includes many other measures other than assessment scores. Things like you could look at chronic absenteeism, you could look at discipline rates, you could look at attendance rates. Those are just some examples. And within each pillar, there will be a number of these measures and metrics. And then that group will also be recommending, as the chair was kind of describing with his football analogy, what the baseline data should be and what the target should be over the implementation period, the 10 years and beyond, perhaps, in terms of what the expectations of progress are going to be. So we cannot answer that question right now, but I can definitely say that it will include more than assessment scores.
And we'll have that this spring, so it's not something to be delayed, and it will be an open process, because to get that right is so crucial to the appropriate evaluation of where we're going and how we get there.
So thank you for the answer. Editorially, it's comforting to know that we'll have a broader base for judging the progress of it. And maybe a college bowl analogy, for those of us who don't throw football so well.
Well, it's not like the Georgia TCU football game, but we knew the outcome of that at the first quarter, I think, right? But listen, here's one thing you have to keep in mind, though, in addition to all of the things we do annually, and we'll have that for you to evaluate. Remember what I said earlier. By the end of the 10th grade, our long-time North Star will be there for us. You got to be college career ready at that point. And so no matter what we do during the interval period, that ultimately that's going to be a North Star for us. We will know, and we will have an opportunity to make correction within the last couple of years of that student's career in high school. But at the end of the 10th grade, this plan calls for all students to be career or college ready by the end of the 10th grade. That's pretty ambitious.
I do see one more hand up. Delegate Wu, if you're there, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have two questions. I think based on what I have discussion, I would like to look at the data both on the absolute improvement and the relative improvement, right? So absolute improvement help us understand how far away we can achieve. Relative improvement talk about individual district because each school district is different. That will help us grasp what they've been doing, how effective their operation have been doing. So I have a question on the funding part. I was on school board for the last 4 years, right? And so Howard County School Board talk about this blueprint many times. I think we appreciate this opportunity. However, we realize that the challenge we're facing is a county share, county matching to the fund. Like the state put the funding there will be county match. I think for many counties, we're probably not able to match like proportionally to what the state had been provided. What's the suggestion there? Probably both for Montgomery County and Howard County, we have issues there. Unless we raise tax again. I think that's a huge concern for many people who are on the school board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, that's part of what the committee will be looking at in the next couple of months. Keep in mind the following, is that the information will be disaggregated so that we would know per student and the categories of what how they are performing. So it's not going to be, and we know that there are some differences around the state in terms of their approach to that. This is why we're taking the time to include them in coming up with those baselines for how we measure going forward.
Thank you, County Executive.
Thank you, sir.
Madam Chair, can I have an answer for the second question?
Yeah, regarding local funding, I think that you were asking about for the counties that are funding maintenance of effort and have concerns. I'll just say a few words and then I think the chair probably has more to add. But you know, essentially, I think what there needs to be a real partnership between the school systems and the counties to set priorities around implementing the blueprint and to really identify where the county and the school system are in agreement around investing in the school system to achieve the blueprint's outcomes, because that is the state law and that is what we all want to do for our students. And it's not just about new money, it's also about how existing funds are being spent, because, you know, and the chair started with this, it's not just about keeping on doing what we've been doing and then sort of incrementally adding things on. It's really about rethinking what we're doing and making sure that it's all aligned with the blueprint's goals relative to the blueprint programs. And that's going to require rethinking some things that are being done now that perhaps in order to achieve the blueprint's results can't be done anymore. So it's gonna, if this were easy, it would already have been done. And so it is going to definitely take some very hard work, some heavy thinking, and some real partnership, I think, between the school systems and the counties, which does occur in some counties, but unfortunately not all counties.
Yeah. Delegate Wood, one point I served as the president of the Maryland Association of Counties. And I know the differences that you've talked about around the state. Some districts are clearly at or exceed the maintenance of effort, and it may not be a challenge, but others, well, very may be. There needs to be some very hard choices, as Rachel has indicated, with the local officials of the resources they need in order to enhance and ensure that they meet the requirements of the blueprint. Unfortunately, that's something that we can't at this point dictate, but we know what it is that we're going to do in terms of the AIB, but we're going to ensure that the legislation is implemented with fidelity. But there will be some tough choices for some communities around the state in terms of how they respond to the financial requirements of meeting the obligations of the blueprint.
Thank you. And I appreciate your answer, Ms. Heiss and Mr. Leggett, because this is a partnership, and our role as legislators is to work in partnership with you, and in turn, the locals need to work in partnership with us to try to make sure this happens, and that it happens for the entire state, and for all of our children. So again, we appreciate all of your work, and being here on a Friday afternoon with us. Thank you. And Chair Barnes, do you have anything you would like to say?
Yes.
No,
Chair.
you said it all, Chair Atterbury. The state intends to keep its commitment, and Mr. Leggett, Ms. Heiss, I hope you'll be happy to hear we intend to make sure the counties keep their commitment as well.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for the great work that you're doing.
Let me just add the following comment, and Rachel touched on this a little bit. You may hear from a number of people in different groups, advocacies, and even in your local jurisdictions about changes that they would like to see, opportunities or things that you may have missed in the legislation. We've heard those. We've experienced and had all of the opening meetings to talk about much of that. This is not an easy process. There will be difficulty. There will be disagreements. Again, if it was easy, you'd have done it, and we've done this a long time ago. And so I'm not suggesting to you that we will be able to get through this without some major disagreements here and there. But we plan to implement this blueprint with fidelity. We don't plan to go back. We are moving forward, and this is why we aggressively, I said aggressively, try to adjust to the timeframes that we have in order to get this comprehensive plan out. It will not be easy. You'll hear complaints, but we need to remain focused, and we need to remain consistent and sustain the momentum and the work that we need in order to achieve this. Otherwise, we will not get there. We will try to work in partnership with all of the parties involved. And we cannot go back to doing business as we've done it in the past. Otherwise, this will not be successful. But I am very confident, optimistic that if we work together in partnership, we will have success, and you'll have a system that you'll be proud of for many years to come.
We appreciate that very much. We agree with you wholeheartedly. Well, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions. If there's nothing else from Chair Atterbury, we can move to our next panelist, Chair Leggett. Ms. Heiss, thank you so much for being with us. Keep up the great work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'll move on to Maryland State Department of Education. We have our superintendent we're pleased to be joined with today, and as well as Chair Crawford. So welcome to you both.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair Barnes and Chair Atterbury, members of the committee. I want to also just underscore our support and engagement with Chair Leggett at AIB. We had a number of conversations. We had a joint meeting last month, very productive, as we started to look at what are those measures of success that we be expecting. And as Chair Leggett said, that's going to be an ongoing effort, and have that wrapped up in a few months. Here, just to very briefly outline what we're doing in terms of helping. I'm here with the state superintendent. I want to acknowledge him, our outstanding state superintendent, and just share a little bit about what we're doing in terms of preparing for and implementing the transformation and what we're doing to support the blueprint. The first thing I want to just say very clearly is the state board is 100% in. We're in for bold, transformative, equitable educational reform for Maryland's children. Last April, we unanimously passed a resolution 2201 calling for urgent transformation of our educational system. And like Chairman Leggett, I am, and I believe our board is just very optimistic about our ability to collectively achieve that result. But we also have to recognize that most major transformational initiatives, both in the public sector and the private sector, fail. About 2/3 of them fail. For the last 30 years of my life, I've been spending a lot of time around transformation. I'm a finance person, and I've been spending a lot of time around transformation, both in the public and private sectors. And I'm happy to report that the major things that you need to have in place, we understand, and we're working with the AIB and stakeholders on. First thing you have to have is a good plan. We have that. And when, as the chair Leggett said, we're refining that plan. We have the right people in the right positions. So we're moving well there. We need to continue to build that strong stakeholder engagement and buy-in. We're building that with the outreach. And then the last thing we have to have is we have to have fidelity over execution over an extended period of time. So we're building that capacity. As I mentioned, we're working very closely with the AIB. Had a great meeting with them. As we started to look, and one of the first things we did was we just sort of looked, what are our mission statements? Very similar. Wording's a little different, but it's very similar. We want the same thing. We're very excited about working with the new administration and continuing to work with the General Assembly. We have a tremendous opportunity. Just cannot allow this to slip through our hands. We're working with the state superintendent to develop a strategic plan for the transformation. We're rolling that plan out in 3 phases, and we're in the 2nd phase now. It's really imperative that we give our children what they need to be ready for kindergarten, ready to read, ready for high school, and then ready for college and career. We're working, as the Chair Leggett said, on what are these measures of success? What will they look like? You know, one of the things I would like to see us do down the road once we have figured this out is to place a dashboard prominently on the state board and on the local board websites that tell the citizens of the state of Maryland how we're doing. First thing you see when you come to our website, first thing you see when you come to a local education agency's website is how we're doing. We've embarked upon an unprecedented level of engagement with local school system leaders, students, parents, educators, business community. We're doing this on an ongoing long-term basis, and we're doing it to listen to what their concerns and their ideas, to collect their input, and to secure their buy-in. In the transformation business, there's an adage that says that culture eats strategy for breakfast. In other words, if you don't spend the time to develop and maintain and nurture the relationships, eventually your initiative will fail. So building that and working with people is incredibly important. As we continue to implement the various parts of the blueprint, we're making sure that those threads are carried through with the strategic plan. I would just like to close with something that I share. I was just in Montgomery County last night, and I just want to share something, a vision that we have. You may not be aware, but in 1916, the General Assembly received a report on the state of Maryland education. Many of the issues that we're dealing with today were cited in that report. And I know a lot of good work and a lot of people have worked over the years, but we're still there. Challenge that I have been saying to everyone is, wouldn't it be something if 100 years from today, people look back to this period of time and wonder, what did we do that dramatically changed the educational trajectory of generations of Maryland's children? What I found as we go out and talk to union, business, parents, local school leaders, everybody wants the same thing. The challenge then is to be able to get everyone on the same page and keep them moving So I'm excited. I'm excited about where we are. At this time, I'd like to just turn this. I want to thank you first for inviting me to come. I'd like to now turn the remainder of our time over to Superintendent Chaudhary. Superintendent Chaudhary, please.
Yes, sir. Welcome, Mr. Superintendent. It's great to see you.
Thank you so much. I do have a presentation, if we can get that up. Thank you, Chair Atterbury. Thank you, Chair Barnes. It's great to be back briefing you my second time around. 1.5 years into the role. Feels longer, but it is well worth it. This is an honor of a lifetime to do this work. I am known for doing very nerdy and long presentations, but I don't want you to think like, man, he's about to give 90 slides. I am not. I'm also known for something called leave behinds. The public is watching. I always try to preemptively think about what people might be thinking about. So I like to leave slides behind. So I'm not going to go over all of them. But where I'm going to brief you on today is just the state of things coming out of the pandemic. I'm not going to go into the blueprint implementation and what the department is doing. This department will be built for the blueprint. That is what I'm doing. That is what I'm focused on. No doubt, we will be an independent force unapologetically to get it right for kids. That is what the department is entrusted to do. And then, you can look up, you can also read about how we have gotten strategic about how we do grant making and how to kickstart things, how to scale things. And so I'm not going to go into those things today. You have that. And then at the end of the slide, there's a whole revamp of our teacher campaign and how to get more Marylanders, as well as people nationally, to come to Maryland, because this is the place to be an educator. So let's go ahead and jump into the state of Maryland schools. And so moving on, so right off the bat, I always like to talk about how many schools we have, right? We have over 1,400 schools as of last year. It is held pretty steady. There's some districts that are consolidating schools. Some districts are dealing with redistricting challenges. Across our 24 systems, we have over 1,400 schools, and most of those obviously are in the elementary grades. So you can just get a snapshot of that. Moving on to the next slide. Let's talk about who our students are. So I like to start with enrollment. So this is fresh data. The executive privilege period of the governor has been lifted. And so you can see our enrollment was over 900,000 at some point, and the pandemic definitely took a swing at that and dropped it, and now we are trending back up. And so we are trending back up towards that 900,000 number, but just wanted to give you a sense of that, what that looks like based as of our enrollment snapshot this fall. Keep going, Justin, please. Just to give you a sense of what that looks like in terms of racial breakdown. You can see which numbers are taking a decline, which numbers are holding steady in terms of demographic groups. And our fastest growing group and continues to grow is our Hispanic and Latino population. And so just to give you a sense of the racial breakdown of our students. Next slide. In terms of service group, our special education population has held pretty steady. Our English learners are growing exponentially. We were at 100,000 before the pandemic. The pandemic took a hit on that. We're back at 100,000, and that number is going to grow. And so it is not a mystery in how to educate English learners, and we're going to get that right. We need to do much better. Our outcomes for them are not very good right now, and we can definitely do better. And I say that confidently. I was groomed in Los Angeles, lived in Texas for 10 years. That's the work I did. English language learners there are a significant population performing at high levels. We can do this. We can definitely do this, especially with the arsenal of the blueprint. If not, we should be able to do it better given the investments we make compared to those states. Next slide, please. And so let's talk about our economically disadvantaged students. That is also trending up. Our students our public student population is becoming more poorer. The economically disadvantaged number uses sources such as SNAP, TANF, and other supplemental programs. And then most recently, with the charge of the legislator, right when I started, I gotten the application and be approved to do Medicaid certification. And so we are one of a few states nationally with USDA doing this pilot, and it is making a huge difference on compensatory ed, and we are identifying more students. So our public student population is becoming majority minority. It's pretty much there, and it is also trending majority disadvantage at a certain point. So it is something that we need to look at, because this is not just an educational problem, this is also a safety net and opportunity problem as well. And so let's just something for you to look at, but Medicaid direct certification had a significant impact on our ability to identify more students. Let's move on to the next slide, please, Justin. Here's what it looks like by school systems. Many school systems are rebounding back to where they were pre-pandemic, and some are just not. So that will be a conversation and a challenge locally, right? You have to think about what that looks like in terms of schools and facilities. While some schools are bursting out of the seams, some neighborhoods and communities, the schools are not regaining that enrollment. And that does pull into your budget. And it also has redistricting conversations and what that looks like. So just wanted to give you that snapshot. Next slide, please. Let's talk about our teachers, our most important adult each and every day in front of students. Our teachers over the last few years are not diversifying. As you can see, Maryland's teaching force has been predominantly white. And it is, and in terms of being able to reflect the student demographic that we serve, it is not moving at that pace, right? That is something that we do definitely need to tackle. It is an important facet of the blueprint, and it is something absolutely, and it's not a feel-good move either. It is a student achievement strategy. The power of students seeing someone look like them and teach them is very powerful. It is settled science at this point. Even one single Black teacher in a student's life can make a huge difference short-term and long-term. Let's go on to the next slide. This is the teacher pipeline in terms of the new teachers who are employed. So just to show you what the pace has looked like in terms of our teacher pool and who is coming out of teacher prep. Again, there was a slight rise in our Black teaching population, but that took a slight dip. So there is work to do. But the other piece that I'm not showing you today is the attrition rates, right? We do have higher attrition rates for our teachers of color than our non-teachers of color. So there's work to do. It's one thing to bring them into the profession. It's another thing to do high quality induction and mentorship and support to make sure they stay. Let's go on to the next slide, please. Wanted to show you what that gap looks like just across the state. We look at our student population. This is something we did for the U.S. Department of Ed, and we look at our teachers. So in terms of, are we narrowing the gap between teacher diversity and student population? And so not really, if you look at it, not really. And this just before the pandemic and where we are right now. So we have work to do. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like by LEA. As you can see, the gaps vary, right? Obviously 2 percentage points in Garrett because it's a more homogeneous population, to 51 percentage points in Wicomico. So you can just get a sense of what that gap looks like. So if we're thinking about other metrics and such, this is a metric to look at in terms of just teacher quality and diversity and what that looks like. Next slide, please. This is just analysis that we do. How likely is it a student is able to experience a teacher of color in their educational trajectory? Not very likely for our students of color. So it is something that, just another way to look at it, like just even 3 years straight, what's the chance of they be able to encounter a student, a teacher who reflects the diversity of our state? It's about half for our Black students, but not as strong as for our other students. So it is something that we do need to work on, but just another view of it. Next slide, please. Teacher qualifications. This has been a problem even before the blueprint. It was a problem even before the pandemic. And it's a problem that looks at us in the face every day. And I think we can do more. So this is basically in our high poverty, in our highly segregated, concentrated poverty school, majority minority school, they have teachers who are less likely tenured. They have teachers who are less likely out of field. That means they have a certificate in one area, but the principal and the district does not have that other subject. So they get a teacher from another a certificate area and they get permission to teach an out of field area. That is not ideal. So this has just been a problem, continues to be a problem. This is part of our federal reporting requirements. We need to do better here, and we need to make sure we are laser focused on making sure. So if we're looking at some early indicators of success when it comes to the blueprint, we should be looking at what the teaching core looks like in our lowest performing schools, because the blueprint will mean nothing if our lowest performing schools in our rural and urban areas are not thriving at the end of the day. Let's go on to the next slide. This is National Board, just a snapshot. You know, the blueprint does go all into National Board. You get an additional 10,000 and you get an initial 7,000, 17,000 if you go to a low performing school. This is just the state of National Board teachers right now in Maryland. A little over 1,700 teachers have National Board, and you can see where they're concentrated and where there are only few in the single digits. Let's go on to the next slide. So there's been an increase, as you can see, you throw out some incentives, increase in terms of interest in National Board. You can see that it was around 600 or so. And then as the blueprint was getting closer to passage, it has exponentially increased in terms of the number of people who want to be National Board. There is attrition. This does not mean there are 3,000 people who are National Board. They are committing to go become a National Board certified teachers. There's usually a 20, sometimes as high as a third in terms of the percentage of people who end up not doing it after declaring it, but just wanted to give you a sense of that and what that looks like. Next slide, please. Just average teacher salary. The blueprint seeks to raise the teacher pay across the board while raising pay up to the 60,000 mark. There are still disparities in terms of what that looks like. We definitely need to pay attention to this, because all of our counties and their districts and their school systems, coupled with state share, have to get there, have to be able to get to the 60,000, be able to provide that bump across the board, across their salary schedule. But just to give you a sense of how wide the gap could be in terms of what teacher pay looks like in terms of our local jurisdictions. Let's go on to the next slide. I want to give you a view of the 60K. So the road to 60K, blueprint says starting in July 1, 2026, starting pay will move to 60,000. So this is what the current road looks like there. Again, you can see wide variation. Some are very close, some not quite close just yet. So there's work to be done there as well, because this will help also tackle our teacher recruitment challenges as well. Next slide. Teacher vacancies. Teacher shortage is a real phrase when you think of it in targeted ways. Teacher shortages existed even before the pandemic. It got exacerbated by the pandemic, especially within certain neighborhoods and communities, even just within a school system. As you can see, all of our school system experienced a teacher shortage, our teacher vacancy challenge, other than Worcester County. 2,000 vacancies over this past school year. And we normally don't take that many snapshots. So I ran an off-cycle interval data collection to see what that would look like, both leading up to the start of the school year and then obviously as we got into the school year. So just wanted to see, give you a sense of how the year started off there. Next slide, please. In terms of teacher prep, our teacher prep enrollment is decreasing, but it has decreased by a third, right? And this is mirroring national trends. Definitely even has, the pandemic has even made it tougher for folks who are interested in becoming teachers. So we are going to have to raise that buck up to not only just 2012 numbers, but hopefully even above that. We are a high import state. 50% of our teachers come from out of state. So that is a huge dependence we have. But just to give you a sense of what the pipeline looks like. Next slide, please. If you look at the view from just the need and just what is actually being produced, right? Supply and demand, it is not even close to where we are. And that's assuming there's a 1-for-1 match, right? So if you have 2,072 teachers and say they're all special education vacancies, they're not. Are all those teachers being produced for special education, right? Like there's not a 1-for-1 match. We have to make sure that our LEAs and our institutions of higher ed are speaking, are aligned and producing exactly what the need is. So the department is also laser-like focused on this and trying to shift our grant making to ensure that alignment as part of their blueprint plans. We ask those questions as well, but just to give you a sense of that. And again, that's just assuming that there's a 1-for-1 match and that these candidates stay in Maryland and don't go somewhere else. Next slide, slide, please. Our greatest shortage area continues to be special education. That's been true even before the pandemic. We need to do more to get more people to be special education teachers. Of course, we have single subjects, but and those are a wide variety of subjects. But just to give you a breakdown, we do this as part of a requirement with the U.S. Department of Ed. I'm trying to make this more granular over time, but just wanted you to get a sense of where the shortage areas are and what we need to produce. Next slide, please. How are our students doing? And this will be the last block of slides I do, so you get a sense of what the baselines are. We are resetting the baselines, right? The pandemic rocked, right? A state of virtual learning rocked our students and our teachers. And here is what the data looks like. This is our more normal year, right? Last year, you heard masking and quarantining and a lot of other things. This year, it feels like this return to normal, but we know that return alone is not going to be good enough. So our kindergarten readiness rate is trending back up, but not at pre-pandemic levels, right? But still below 50%. So wanted you to give a sense of that. We take that snapshot every fall. Our teachers give that multidimensional assessment to our students. So we are at 42% in terms of being kinder ready. So we start with our earliest grade, but let's go to the next slide, please. And this is what it looks like in terms of our LEAs. So you can get a sense of what that looks like. Look at Worcester County, 73% of their students are kinder ready. There's a high poverty school in Worcester County called Snow Hill Elementary. Close to 80% of those kids are kinder ready. So poverty does not have to be destiny. And one of the things that I often do is obsessing about where we are getting it done and trying to scale that. That is one of the obsessions I have. I do this with my team once every 2 weeks. Show me a school that is getting it done for our English learners, for our Black boys, our economically disadvantaged students. What is going on there? And then I go there and I hang out and spend the entire day there. And so, you know, we have work to do, but answers also exist within our school system. And that's important to me. I really am trying to shift the department's professional learning where the learning labs are on the ground, right? And that's a huge shift that has not happened before. Let's go on to the next slide. English language arts, there is a more hopeful story here. We are trending back up. We are actually exceeding pre-pandemic proficiency levels when it comes to English language arts. Maryland students across our subgroups are doing well. Our pre-pandemic numbers, we are actually not have only met, but we are exceeding those numbers across our student groups. Next slide, please. We are, as you can see, across our racial and service groups, all have made gains or held steady to pre-pandemic numbers. So I'm showing you that comparison on this slide. Our Black students are doing better than they were pre-pandemic, and lots of things to credit to that. But one of the biggest things is this strong obsession about getting literacy right, especially early literacy, but also a huge shift to ensuring the science of reading is being implemented well. We have still work to do, but there is great groundwork being laid and is paying dividends. However, another factor is virtual learning does not impact, it hurts students in literacy too, but it doesn't hurt you as math. And that goes to my next slide, please. The numbers in math, keep going to the next slide. English 10, same story. Math is not pretty. I am going from joy to gloom right now. We are at single digit proficiencies in some grades. We need to go all out in math, and that will be my obsession. You know, as we end out this year and go into the next school year. Reading, we know what we need to do, but math, we have work to do. We were already trending down even before the pandemic, and the pandemic definitely threw a haymaker at that. And so we are starting back up. Math, we have a lot of work to do. Next slide, please. You can see that based on student group and service group. As you can see, downward trends there, and the rebound back is going to be a big struggle, but we're going to get it right. We're going to figure it out. So if you want to give back to your elementary schools or your high schools, be a math tutor. That is something that is going to be a very important element in all of this. And so just as just to give you a sense of where we are in terms of where we're starting, there was a lot of conversations in the previous presentation. How are we going to set targets and baselines? Here are our baselines. Next slide, please. Same story in algebra. Again, single digit proficiencies for some groups, as you can see. That is just not okay. That is not okay. We have work to do. Next slide, please. And I will stop there. You know, I have a whole other set of slides. You can ask questions about those. But I'm going to stop here for today because I know we were going to do just 20 minutes. And so I appreciate you allowing me to just even go this far. So I stand ready to answer questions.
All right, well, thank you for the presentation, Delegate Acevedo.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the presenters. I have a question for Rachel, our Executive Director, and I guess I believe he's the President of the Board, Mr. Crawford. It's regarding, we're talking a good bit about implementation and what the board is responsible for implementing and the staff, et cetera. And I'm curious as to, one, whether we are applying an equity lens when we talk about implementation, and if so, who on your staff is responsible? And this is a question for Rachel, but who on your staff are responsible for, I guess, like the equitable implementation or applying the equity lens to a lot of these things that the AIB are expected to implement. Curious about that. Don't disagree with all that we need to do. Just want to make sure that as we're implementing this, we're doing so equitably, and that there are people on your staff. And I guess you could talk a little bit more about your staff. I think in your presentation you mentioned that you all work with a small but mighty staff. I'm curious to find out who on your staff is responsible for this, and how you all are going to go about doing this equitably. Thank you.
Mr. Superintendent, you were.
I heard Rachel. If it was addressed to me, I'm ready to pounce on.
Yeah, I think it's addressed to you and Delegate Acevedo.
So Dr. Kudry, you can certainly respond, but I'm very much interested in hearing from not just yourself, but Mr. Crawford, as well as Rachel. Thanks.
I think Ms. Heiss has finished her presentation, so we can double back with her on that, Delegate Acevedo, but let's have our superintendent and our chair go ahead and answer to the best of their ability.
Okay.
Thank you, Superintendent.
So equity is in the DNA of what we do. I am not a fan of standalone equity roles. You know, this post George Floyd's moment with diversity checkboxes, we're not going to do performative acts in the Maryland State Department of Education. We take an equity lens and audit in everything we do. That is personal to me as a child of poverty, as a government kid, as a Title I district leader. We do that in everything we do. If you see me present, if you see the state board of presentation, if you see this deck, everything, especially look at that neighborhood indicators of poverty section of it. We look at, for me, you heard me say this before, right? The blueprint means nothing if the lowest achieving students are not thriving. The one thing I want you to really hone in on, if you look at slide 58, I talk about something called the blueprint implementation plan template. Districts have to turn in their plan in March of 2023. In there, districts have to talk about what they are doing broken down by race and class and set targets for those goals. And we're not going to be lax on that, right? We're going to make sure that our curriculum is culturally responsive in teaching. This is also true for how they're going to diversify their profession. If you look at the template, right, they have to focus on equity. I am not interested in an equity checkbox policy or equity officer. I'm interested in seeing equity in special education, English learner outcomes, in teacher hiring, how HR screens candidates. I'm interested in all of that. So that is how I operate. I mean, this is a conversation I can go on, but I'm not going to, and I have the staff to do it. So I am not, the State Department of Education is the one who is implementing at the end of the day, right? And so we are doing that work. I appreciate the question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And from the state board's perspective, as the superintendent said, the briefings that we get, we dive into this. And we are very much aware of it, and it's part of the briefings, and it is something that the state board members are very, very interested in. So we stay right on top of it, and the superintendent has done a great job of focusing on the outcomes, not worried about the positions and the like. And we're very, we've got a lot of work to do, but we do monitor that, and the state board does pay close attention to that.
And Delegate Acevedo, Ms. Heiss has left, or I would have let her answer, but she said that she is still listening and will get back to you directly on this issue. That's important that she answer you as well.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair. Can I get one quick second?
Sure.
About it?
Yep.
Less 30 seconds. Dr. Choudhury, you mentioned curriculums, and I appreciate that. On the topic of culturally responsive pedagogy, can you talk a little bit more about that as it relates to our curriculum uniformity across our public school system? So it's not something that, you know, Montgomery or Prince George's or Baltimore City is doing, but is across our school system. And then what is being done to ensure that we're training teachers so that then they're able to not just engage with, but provide instruction when we talk about culturally responsive pedagogy.
So our districts are in different places right now, but as part of this March 2023 submission, they're going to submit their 3-year and 5-year plan in March 23 and March 24. That's how it's designed. The blueprint calls for something called the CCR curriculum, the College and Career Ready curriculum that's going to get students to being ready by 10th grade. That curriculum has to be culturally relevant and responsive. They have to discuss that. They have to be able to say how they're going to adopt that. You can have 5 different reading curricula who check that off that those quality criteria. It doesn't have to be just B1. What the department is doing and what it's charged to do is to make sure that menu is very clear. It's not a mystery in terms of how you select quality curriculum. I was just presenting to the Senate Education Committee yesterday with Dr. Santelices from Baltimore City, who talked about their multi-step process for adopting high quality curriculum. And here's the step that they also took, and this is something we're leaning into. Not only do they have the research-based factors, but oftentimes high quality curriculum does not get the culturally responsive part right. So they have to go supplement that, right? And they have something called the Be More curriculum that they do with that, to be able to see students read stories and see themselves in the leaders and such that they are reading about. So those are the things that we're focused on. We have an approval process, a review process. Eventually, I'm going to have a comprehensive, basically, dashboard where you can go and look at every type of curriculum that exists in the school systems and how our educators are rating them across several factors, and one of which would be culturally responsive and reflective. So that's where we're at with that.
Very great questions. Thank you, Delegate Acevedo. I think there's another appropriations member, and then I can turn it over to Chair Atterbury. There's some Ways and Means member. Delegate Henson.
Chairman, and thank you, Dr. Choudhury, for the presentation and also the broader materials that are in the PowerPoint that you prepared. It's a lot of great and very useful information. You ended your presentation on performance. And if I'm understanding the foundations of the Kerwin report and blueprint correctly, a lot of performance really deals with entering school prepared, kindergarten preparedness, all of those early childhood features. What we're hearing from our local Board of Education and my district, Delegate Jones is on the line as well. We represent Anne Arundel County, our districts there. We're hearing a lot of concern around being ready to implement the universal pre-K mandate that's built in. Are you hearing those concerns or anything statewide that looks like we may be headed for some challenges, or anything that you could flag for us that we might be able to partner with you all on?
Yeah. Lots of opinions. The Senate committee ended up keeping me for 3 hours, from 30 minutes to 3 hours, but we won't do that today. But we talked about this. I'll give you the 2-minute version for now. We have a lot of work to do there. One is a facilities challenge, right? I sit on the interagency board. I don't myself, does people think sometimes I dole out those dollars? No, I am one vote on that interagency school construction commission, IAC. So, districts are trying to figure out space and how is spacing going to look like. And, we had Garrett County that had to repurpose a middle school to be able to fit their expansion of pre-K and the work that they're doing. So there is that. So there's going to be a spacing challenge, right? Just on top of a staffing challenge. The other challenge is this goal of a mixed delivery system, right? The blueprint calls for local counties to partner with private providers to be able to make this happen. I can tell you right now, those partnerships are not as robust as they need to be. And so we are basically starting in step one. In many places, there are some examples, but not really. And so, and then the private providers are also feeling it like, as we shift closer to universal pre-K, it's not truly universal pre-K, but pre-K covered for those who really need it, right? Are we going to put them out of business too? And that's a legitimate concern. And that eventually we'll all have to have a more serious conversation about. And so right now the goal is a mixed delivery system plus your own facilities. So yes, we are hearing those concerns loud all the time. But one thing I am pushing on is these partnerships, because I need to see good faith efforts. So as part of their March 23 submissions, they need to show good faith efforts that they're willing to do this. And then the department is making sure that it can provide all kinds of, incentives and partnerships and mediation and guidance to be able to do this well. So I'll leave it at that for today.
For your diligence on this issue, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
We'll go to Delegate Ebersol.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Two questions in a slightly different direction, if you will. First of all, former math teacher, so yes, I'm all in with you. Nice graphs, by the way, too. Really, really good ones, Mr. Superintendent. First question is, you had a graphic that showed where the National Board Certified teachers were around the state, and there was a wide variety in terms of numbers there. Do counties, I think they do, offer their own cumulative incentives on top of the incentives that we're planning and do begin to offer? And and if they do, and I think they do, I'm not going to call particular counties out, but it'd be interesting to know the range from possibly $0 to what are counties offering in order to also offer their own incentives for teachers to become National Board Certified.
I'll have to run that data for you. It's not part of our standard data collection. I don't know if that's still going to end up being true. I think people are just jumping on the 10,000 versus making it, 15,000 or 12,000. So I'll have to go look into that. We get the data collection on how many teachers are going to ultimately wants to be national board, and because we reimburse those costs. And then, it is also a wealth equalized, right? So there is a county share or to that. But in terms of people going above and beyond that, I'm going to have to look at that. I have not seen it as much in my conversation. So I think people might be just taking on the 10 now before what they were. Maybe they may have been doing more, but they're like, let me just absorb it into this concept now. So
then I saw some smaller counties with large numbers and some larger counties with small numbers. And so to what do we attribute the difference in that case? Is it counties? I'll just leave it to you if you have any insights on that.
Yeah, I think it's some counties already had a culture around national board. Others did not. And they're barely getting started. Some, they've been doing it for some time, so they're now just scaling. Others are just starting, so learning how to talk about it, learning how to support it, because one of the things that they have to do is support them as a cohort, right? That means you have to create investments like these 20 people want to be national board. As they're teaching every day, let's bring them in at periodic points during the school year to make sure that they're all giving each other healthy pressure to study, to do their assignments, to finish successfully, right? And so I think those programs for others were already in place, whereas others are barely starting. So that's what I attribute it to. And of course, you got size and range and everything, and just interest in terms of the type of teacher and everything. But we have 3,300 or so that have declared they want to do it. I want to dig into that number to see what the attrition looks like and where they end up. But when I come back to you next year, you'll see more numbers that will rise above these all of our counties, I predict. So
thank you, Madam Chair. Another question, or do you want me to wait my turn and come back around?
You can finish up. One quick question.
Thank you very much. So you had a lot of data on teacher shortages. I'm wondering if you're compiling data on shortages of other school support personnel, like school psychologists, occupational therapists, speech pathologists. Are we looking at those shortages and compiling data on that?
Yes, it's part of our data collection. We have that. We get staffing. We publish that stuff online publicly that says what our numbers are in terms of psychologists and other staff and personnel. Yes, we do have that.
Okay, I'm going to reach out to your office and ask for that too, if you don't mind. Thank you. I won't make you remember. We'll ask. Thanks.
I will remember.
Excellent. You're a better man than I. Thank you very much for all your honest answers. I appreciate them.
Delegate Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Superintendent, it's good to see you. And I just want to start off by saying thank you for your incredible partnership on childcare. I know there's a lot of really good stuff that we didn't get a chance to cover in your presentation that's in here, but you and your team have just been incredible to work with. And I know we've got some work to do on pre-K and just really looking forward to continuing to partner with you and your team on that. Just a quick question, and I know because you expressed sort of similar concern back in the fall. I'm really excited to see our state literacy rates, but I know the NAEP scores that came out in the fall showed us, at least on reading, trending in really the wrong direction, although Baltimore City was a really great bright spot in the work that they're doing up there. And, you know, we've had some really great conversations with a group of literacy advocates that are working. And I know the Maryland Leads piece is a great next step, but how do we sort of square the circle on where we're seeing our progress on NAEP with what we're seeing on our state assessments?
Absolutely. I'll just put it this way. I'm taking the carrot approach with Maryland Leads. You can read about it. I included the chapter and what that looks like. I'm giving, because one of the things that you have to invest in when you are going to re-educate teachers, I'm going to say it like it is, on how to do literacy well and take something like letters training, which is multiple hours. It helps to make sure that they are paid for that time. And so Maryland Leads creates that incentive to do that. So right now, in our army of teachers are being trained in that while also people are adopting curriculum. But as part of the blueprint template, I also enshrined that in there. That wasn't in the blueprint per se in terms of existing teachers. And so we got that in there. We work with the AIB. I believe at a certain point, it will be time for a bill to cement that. And I think by the time we get to that, maybe next session or maybe one more session, when we look at that, it will essentially be a bill that forces almost kind of like an audit, like, are you already there? My hope is through this one-time state set aside and the blueprint template experiences, they all step up and get there. And then it's just a check, right? To make sure that they're all there or not. And so ultimately, I think Ready to Read Act was not enough. Ready to Read Act was just screening kids. It was not training an army and teachers. There's a reason why Black students in Mississippi perform higher on the NAEP than Maryland students, because in 2016, they passed an aggressive law saying the entire state's teaching corps will be trained in letters and teacher prep. I don't care how you feel, you will fix your curriculum as well. So we have not taken that approach, but I think there will be a time to have a version of that. But the good thing is we are already doing many incentives and pushes, so many will hopefully already be there. So those are my thoughts on that.
Well, I'm super excited to keep working with you on that. Thank you for your energy, and thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Delegate McCaskill.
I apologize. There's so much going on there painting in here. Good afternoon, everyone. This question is for you, Dr. Chaudhry. I am actually a Maryland child care provider. You may know me from SEIU Local 500. I'm the former VP for the Child Care Division, and we've had conversations many of times with your office. And speaking of the good faith that you mentioned and the mixed delivery system, has there been any commission on or thought around in including providers? So, and how to include them? I know systems like the Aspire program, it's working really well for providers in family child care who are now delivering the pre-K expansion in their homes, in which I do myself and have been doing it for 2 years. There used to be at once upon a time an umbrella for providers to come under a certified teacher for like under the Judy Center. And for some reason that has dissipated. To help, I believe, curb some of the mixed delivery and the overcrowding of schools because we can't build them fast enough. And of course, I have my own feel of putting little kids in big schools. That's another conversation for another day. But has there been any consideration of perhaps figuring out how the Judy Center or organizations like us, the Aspire program, can help get the child care providers prepared for what's to come for the mixed delivery system? It works well. I've been doing it for 2 years, and I'm just wondering about the consideration.
Absolutely. So I'm looking at everything. You know, I'm coming from a district. I used to be in Dallas. We used to have our teachers in Dallas who are employed partner with private providers and actually go teach there. And they would all share resources and everything that would help bring quality across our private sector as well, because at the end of the day, we're all servicing the city of Dallas. So I am familiar with this model as something similar to that. And so I would like to bring something like that here. I think it's a matter of, because there hasn't been anything at scale like this, right? It's about making sure we have the right incentives and groundwork in place to do it, right? What does it look like for enrollment count, right? Does the provider get a portion and the district gets a portion when you share that? Is something we figured out in Texas, for example. The thing that I would share with you is right now, as part of the March 2023 Blueprint Implementation Plan template submission that is on slide 58, districts have to demonstrate that they are putting in initial good faith efforts to do this. So that there's no plan getting approved if they do not show hard evidence on that they are speaking to providers and working with providers. And I will tell you, yes, some of them are having a tougher time than others. And I sent an email to a provider, and just because they didn't respond is not going to count. I'm not going to give you approval on that. Like, you have to make best faith efforts on that. So it's going to be a challenge, but it is definitely possible.
Okay, so real quickly, because it is Friday, it is a challenge. I do totally agree. But I guess I could charge your office with perhaps working with the organizations instead of reinventing the wheel. There are organizations that already do this very well. And perhaps we can meet with other organizations like the unions and MFN to figure out together, to partner how we can do this. Our providers are ready. They're more than capable. This can help curb some of the enrollment process and making sure that our children still get the care and the quality, curriculum that they deserve. So I just, maybe we can soon and very soon figure out together how we can move forward. And because the plan there's already an invention of it. We don't have to redo it all over again. So maybe perhaps we can charge you with making sure that we communicate and how we can get this done more expeditiously.
I will take a look at it. I have a new assistant soup, Dr. Shayna Cook. She would be the great person to start with. She is absolutely amazing. And so she worked in private provider settings herself. And so that is where I would start with that conversation. And then we can go from there, because my team is a reflection and extension of me. So why don't we start there first, and then we can go from there. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Delegate. Don't see any other questions. So Superintendent Chaudhry, Chair Crawford, thank you for being with us. Thank you for your service to our state. It's greatly appreciated. I think Chair Atterbury want to close us out, closing remarks.
Yes, thank you. I too want to thank our state superintendent, Dr. Chaudhry, for being here, Chair Crawford for being here, and Mr. Leggett and Ms. Heiss. I would implore all of the members of both committees to look. The book was delivered from the AIB. Mine was in my office. And please take a look at the slides that were sent to you. It was a lot of significant information, particularly for our newer members who just were elected to the General Assembly. As you can see, some folks, like I mentioned, our speaker, Chair Barnes, and Vice Chair Washington put significant amount of works in both of these committees into really historic legislation for our children, and as you heard, for our teachers. And so we're going to move forward this session, both of our committees, and whatever tweaks we need to make, and work in partnership with the AIB and with our state superintendent, so that all of our children, no matter where they live, can have a great future, see teachers that look like them in their classrooms, and so that our teachers are prepared as best as they possibly can be. So with that, I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and we will see you Monday night, right, Madam Speaker, at 8 p.m. sharp.